Mixed in through the woods here is a real common understory plant. You see this plant, here's another one, here's one, here's one, here's one. This is not one. That's not one, but there's one, and there's one over there, and there's one back there. That is not the same one, okay? But this here is wild Sarsaparilla, or Aradia nudicalis. It is in the ginseng family, and it is called wild sarsaparilla, but I will say that there is a vine that looks kind of wild yam-like, which is a Smilax. Actually, there's several different species, but a Smilax genus vine that is also called wild sarsaparilla. And I remember one time, a long time ago, I had this naturalist on one of my walks, and I was pointing out a plant. I was saying it was wild sarsaparilla. It was the Smilax vine, and she's like, afterwards, she's like, I don't think that that was wild sarsaparilla. And I encouraged her, as I encourage you to do. If you think I'm saying something wrong, tell me while I'm saying it, because every once in a while I might actually say something wrong, and that would be a drag. But even though the two plants don't look anything alike, they both share the same name because a lot of plants used to be named on their uses, okay? So the true sarsaparilla, if you think of sarsaparilla that used to be used like in root beer, first of all, it's not sarsaparilla. Sarsaparilla, I think, this is my summation, I think sarsaparilla is because sassafras and sarsaparilla were often used together in root beer, they just kind of got turned into this new plant called sarsaparilla. Sarsaparilla is a Smilax genus vine that grows in the Caribbean and has a nice root beer type flavor, and it has an alterative action, okay? We'll remember that alteratives would be like metabolic tonics. They help the assimilation and the utilization of nutrition and the clearance of the waste products from that nutrition, okay? So things that facilitate that process and coordinate all of the organs involved in that process end up being alterative plants or alterative tonics. This plant got named wild sarsaparilla even though it doesn't look like that, and it doesn't look like the other Smilax species that grow around here like greenbrier or catbrier, because the root was used and considered to be close to interchangeable with the other one, okay? So it was by that usage that the common names became similar. And this plant, 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 they might all actually be one plant connected by underground runners, even if they're really far plants. And maybe these plants are connected. And when you look at this plant, oh, hi, Mr. Earthworm. Oh, look, this one branches out in two different directions. We look at this plant, first we see that it's got the upright portion of the stem, which looks like it's ringed with little horizontal bands, okay? And then, let me get my knife and cut that section out to pass around. And then you have the underground runner, which is not ringed with horizontal bands. So there's the plant, and that was clearly connected to this plant, and then it branches out in this direction, so it's probably connected to that one over there. Even that far, to have this underground runner underneath. And it's an alterative, okay? So it's a metabolic tonic, but all alterative plants have an action on the metabolism as a whole, and then they have their own little niche that they fit into where they might have a stronger action in one area or another. And with this plant, I think that there's, and I know people who would disagree, but I think that there is an action on the adrenals, okay? So the part of your endocrine system that handles your response to stress. And that it has sort of a relaxing or tonifying effect on the adrenals. And when someone is in a state of like sympathetic dominance, that it helps to relax the adrenals and bring the metabolism forward. Nettles does this too, but this plant and nettles just don't taste the same. They don't feel the same. They don't have the same energy, but they think they facilitate sort of the same action. Because it's in the ginseng family, some people will say like, oh, it must be an adaptogen, like ginseng is an adaptogen, okay? I find the term adaptogen to just be problematic, but we know it's an alterative. And maybe rather than saying, oh, it's an adaptogen and having all the specific things that some people think go along with that of working on the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, some people include thyroid in there, to say that this is a plant that when people have deficient metabolism from stress, and because they're stressed out, because they're in like, oh, I'm in a stress state, so because I'm in a stress state, my metabolism is running deficient, because you don't need to be in a metabolic state when you're in a stress state. You don't need to be digesting your food. Because my metabolism is deficient, if I take something that relaxes my adrenals and then stimulates my metabolism a little bit, it helps to shift me out of that sympathetic dominance and more towards parasympathetic rest and digest, inward turn energy. When I pass that root around, the part that has the little circles around it has a really nice flavor, a sweet flavor, okay? Sweet herbs tend to be tonifying and often are considered to be like the sweet, subtly spicy flavor is what we associate with herbs that are good tonics for stress. Sweet herbs build up the energy. We think about ginseng has that sweet flavor. Licorice has a very sweet flavor. Codenopsis has that kind of sweet flavor. So it has that flavor that can remind us of some other adaptogens. And to me, that means a lot more than the fact that it's in the Aralia, family of plants. Aralia family of plants is, there's a ton of plants in there, and some of them have been said to be adaptogens, but it makes more sense to say that we know there's a traditional use of this being an alterative, and we know that there are other alteratives that act on the adrenals. And we know that when you're stressed out, your metabolism is deficient. So having that action where it stimulates the metabolism helps to shift you out of that stress-dominant, stress-excess state. You can gather these roots and make tea from them. I like the top parts of the root more than I like the runners. They've got more flavor. You can make a tincture from them. I think tincture seems to me to be a little bit easier. In places where this grows, a lot of it grows. And so it's not hard to kind of like go through and pick sections of root. But if you're using the top part of the root, that would mean that I'm taking this above ground part of the plant. I'm taking this above ground part of the plant. I'm taking this above ground part of the plant. And I can get more small doses of tincture out of taking a few of these rather than gathering a whole bunch and then drying them out and then using that as tea. So to me, it's just a little bit more ecologically sound to use that as tincture. If you're not into the small dose thing, then that makes the whole issue sort of complicated. But even then, you'd still be able to get more doses out of what you harvest than if you dry it out and use it for tea. Because think about gathering these to dry it out. You saw how big that little section is? I think I've seen them to be about that long, but never much thicker than a pencil. Not as thick as my pinky, okay? So how many little sections like that would it take to make, a pound? And then figure that when you dry them out, if you're going to dry them out to make tea with, they're going to lose about half of their weight to water. So then you have a half pound. How long is that half pound going to last you making tea? Well, you can mix it into other things, and that would be good. But if you gather a pound of fresh roots and then you use it to make tincture, and then your tincture you're giving out in like between the 5 and 15 drop range, well, you've got a pound of root, 32 ounces of tincture, roughly. 32 of those little bottles that you might be taking in 10 drop doses, that's going to last quite a while. So you get better longevity from the plant. Some places this plant is so abundant that it might be considered a moot point, but not all places.